And this is our review of rhetorical analysis. A repeat for those of you who took 1101 with me over the summer, and perhaps new material for those of you who are just with me for 1102. So if you will please open the Essay Survival Kit. I hope you have it printed out, but if not, please open it on a split screen and you can look at it here with me. We are going to go to page 30, Binding Your Audience, the Rhetorical Situation, because understanding the rhetorical situation is the first step of conducting a rhetorical analysis. So I'm going to go up here to the little box, put in 30, enter, there we are. All right, so whatever text you choose to analyze, the first thing you need to do is figure out the components of this Venn diagram, and that's going to tell you a lot about the text itself. As you're figuring that out, I also want you to start making connections to how and why these items, like who the audience is, are relevant to the meaning of the text, right? So if you don't know who the audience of a given text is, then you don't really know what the text was intended to mean to that audience. Also, we need to know a little bit about the background of the writer. We need to know what their experience and expertise is. We need to know what the subject of the text is. We need to know what the purpose of the text is, what the exigence or urgency of the text is, what the genre is. This is really important to me. If you are writing about an essay, don't call it a short story or a novel. If you're writing about a collection of essays, do not call it a novel. Because novels are fiction and essays are not. Even if they contain some fictionalized aspect, an essay or a collection of essays is never a novel. So make sure that you understand all of these components. Often you will find that understanding the purpose or what it is that the writer seeks from the audience is more complicated and difficult than you might at first expect. When a writer's writing, especially a personal essay or creating a music video, they may not even know what the purpose is at first. They often write their way into it. And maybe when you're writing a personal or a creative essay, that purpose or intention won't even emerge until near the conclusion, because you're writing through your ideas, you're thinking on the page. And as a creative writer, even if what you're writing is nonfiction, that's perfectly permissible. But your job as an academic writer right now in a composition class is to unpack what a writer is doing and where their purpose ultimately winds up being. So you have to do a little sleuthing, a little detective work to find that in many cases. It won't be at the bottom of the first paragraph in a lot of these essays that you're looking at. All right, so you have to have some patience and some intention with this. Here is an article from the Chronicle of Higher Education that I included in the Essay Survival Kit, and I included it because I wanted you to really understand that relationship between audience and author and text and purpose. So when you read this as a student, it may mean something different to you than what it was originally intended as for the audience of composition teachers. So I want you to read this and think about what it's trying to persuade that original audience to believe. So here, I want you to write this down. There are a lot of things I want you to write down in this lecture, but certainly write this down and commit it to memory. When you're doing a rhetorical analysis or any analysis of a text, the question you're ultimately asking is, what does the writer want the audience to do, think, feel, or believe? Right? So in the case of Marcus Aurelius, his audience is himself. What does he want himself to do, think, feel, or believe? And how does he try to achieve that end? What is his persuasive strategy to that audience himself? What does this article and the writer of this article, Doug Hesse, what does he want his audience, composition teachers, to do, think, feel, or believe? How does he want to change their behavior or their thought patterns? That's the first question. Once you answer that, the next question is, How does he try to make that happen? What evidence does he use? How does he use ethos, pathos, and logos? How does he use his own diction and language? How does he use the organization of the article itself to enact a persuasive strategy? These are questions that you're going to have to ask of the texts that you analyze. So here we go. Who is the writer? Make sure you answer that for your own text. What is the subject? Who is the audience? What is the purpose of the text? What is the genre? What is the exigence or the urgency? What's the context? And for this, you can consider lots of different types of context. So for instance, for Marcus Aurelius, his context was his own life in ancient Rome and the environment that was happening all around him. So perhaps his own sickness, perhaps his role as the emperor of Rome, perhaps his role as father of Commodus, who wasn't looking like he was a real good guy, and I bet you Marcus Aurelius knew that. Perhaps Marcus Aurelius's awareness of his own impending death. Perhaps what the military conflicts or political or social conflicts of Rome at that time. All of these things are the context that compel his writing. Same with Zadie Smith. When she's writing Intimations, what's her context? Well, her context is first who she is politically, socially, historically in America, in Great Britain in 2020. The pandemic that she was experiencing at the time that she was writing, the one that we're still going through, who she is as a biracial woman whose mother was an immigrant from Jamaica, I believe, who she's an academic. She's living in New York, but she's also considers herself a British citizen. She's a teacher. But she's also a human being walking around the streets of New York experiencing what she's experiencing. All of that contributes to the context and the exigence and the urgency. And you have to become aware of that and establish it in order to analyze the text. Then you have to identify at least 3 ways that the author is attempting to persuade the reader. So, those might not be limited to the modes of persuasion, ethos, pathos, and logos. And let me tell you this right now, if your chapters, or your paragraphs rather, in your rhetorical analysis begin with a topic sentence like, Zadie Smith uses ethos to persuade her audience, that is not good enough. In fact, get out of the habit of even using ethos, pathos, and logos in your topic sentences, because I want you to be specific. I want you to use ethos as a analytical framework to look for persuasive strategies, but I want you to be more sophisticated than that when you actually write your topic sentence. I want you to specifically identify how she creates her own credibility, how she explains the credibility of any sources that she might use. Same with Malcolm Gladwell. All right, then I've included for you an article that I found painfully persuasive when I read it in 2013, called Learning How to Die in the Anthropocene. I mean, learning how to die, we can already see an appeal to emotion right there in the title. So I've shared this essay with you to help you practice looking for persuasive strategies, because this particular opinion piece, this editorial in the New York Times, does, I think, a pretty masterful job of using persuasive strategies. Even in the photographs, you could talk about the photographs in this article. And then I've included a short biography of Roy Scranton so that you would know what his own credibility was. So modes, exercise, key questions. Again, who's the audience? What does Roy Scranton want? How do you know that? Right? So once you identify the purpose, you need to be prepared to explain how you know that. How does he use the modes of persuasion? Be specific. And then when you actually conduct your own rhetorical analysis on whatever text you have chosen, you need to be ready to answer all of these questions. What is the thesis? And again, that's the purpose. That's where your author is going to state their purpose. And it might not always be obvious. It's not going to be one sentence at the end of the first paragraph. You're going to have to unpack the document, whatever text you've chosen, and figure out what it is they want from you. And that's the thesis or the purpose or the overall argument. What did the author choose to study? That's their subject, their topic, and why. And when I use the word study, I mean, what did they in their own writing concern themselves with? What was their topic, their subject, their framework of study and analysis? What was the writer's purpose? Did they just want to inform us of some information, or did they want to persuade us, or did they want to criticize? Is it cultural criticism of some type? In all of these cases, it's persuasive. Even if, because remember what I said earlier, rhetoric is simply persuasive language, and all language is persuasive. So certainly right now I have a purpose. My purpose is to teach you how to conduct a rhetorical analysis and to encourage you to always do that whenever you examine a text. And by text, I mean anything. A social media post, a TikTok video, whatever it is, you need to have your analytical brain on, especially right now when all of our social media and a lot of our news sources are being used in nefarious ways. And we have to really be careful that the writers are being responsible for the information they're sharing and that their sources are credible, right? All that is critical right now in an election year for sure. So who's the author's intended audience? What special choices does the author make in order to appeal to that audience? So different audiences have different buttons to push, right? So if you're talking to a group of kindergartners, you're going to use language, images, and information that uniquely appeals to that audience. If you're talking to a bunch of academics who teach composition, they've got different buttons to push and different types of information that they're going to look for. If you're talking to a bunch of sports fans, you might use different diction, different language, different images, different sources, coaches, former players, sports analysts. They're the people that sports fans are going to listen to. They're not going to listen to an English composition teacher, right? What do I know about basketball or football or baseball? Not much. So again, how is the writer creating their persuasive strategy? Who are they turning to? What are the buttons that they're pushing for their specific audience? Does the writer use dialogue or quotations of any kind? And how do they frame those quotations so that we know they're coming from credible sources? I guarantee you they're not going to drop them in there without any framework or context, because they know setting up that framework and context is itself a persuasive strategy. And it's one that I'm trying to teach you because I guarantee you your future teachers will really appreciate it. They will see you being responsible for the information that you share and being accountable for it, and they're going to appreciate that. So learn how to do your quote integration in a way that is itself a persuasive strategy. Are important terms repeated? So are there ideas or types of language or phrases that recur throughout the document that are repeated throughout? You're going to want to pay attention to that, because that's a place where your writer is really trying to do some persuasion to get an idea in your head through repetition. Let's see. What's the sentence structure? What is the sentence structure of the text? Are there fragments or run-ons? Are there specific patterns of language and specific pacing that the writer's using that is meaningful in some way? Usually it is meaningful in some way, even if it is distracting. So you could be doing a rhetorical analysis in which you look at the writer's misuse of grammar, misuse of sentence structure, and how that negatively impacts the meaning of the text. Or conversely, it may positively impact the meaning of the text, especially if you look at who the audience is. All right, so if it's an audience with short attention spans who need quick shifts in imagery and ideas and language, then maybe sentence fragments are a good idea. Maybe imagistic pops of color and language are a good idea. So you need to think about that and connect it to how the text persuades. That's your central mission here. I don't care if you agree or disagree with the text. So get that out of your mind right now. It does not matter to me if you like it. What matters to me is that you understand how it is performing its function to persuade the reader. I don't want to hear about whether you like it or not until the conclusion. And in the conclusion, as you're explaining why you like it or not, you may hit upon a thesis that's even stronger. If that happens, bring it up to your thesis position. Again, it's not simply opinion, it's supported opinion, because you've earned the right through close rhetorical analysis to come to a conclusion. Okay? And finally, what does the writer use punctuation to create an effect? Italics, underlining, parentheses. What marks does the writer use and when? So think about that. You can also think again about any images that appear, headlines. What are the headlines? What are the titles? There's usually a very close relationship between the title of a document and the document itself. If a good writer will try to create a title that somehow encapsulates, even if it's subconsciously, the tenor or meaning of the text itself. If you're looking at videos, you're going to have to add in visual rhetoric. So I'm thinking about Doc Brown's video Corruption. And my first question is, why is it all in black and white? That's pretty interesting. Why are the characters in the video wearing the costumes or the clothing that he's chosen for them to wear? Why is the lighting different at different times, and what does that lighting tell us? Think about the times in the video, if you end up doing a video analysis, that there's full lighting on his face and you can really see him completely illuminated, as opposed to those times where it's the contrast is very high and it's just a deep black and white and we can't really see the contrast, or we can't really see the face in full. What does that mean? It does have meaning, and you can unpack that. All right, so let me know if you have any questions. If you want to be adventurous and write about a video or a Doc Brown stand-up routine, you need to communicate with me so that I can walk you through it, because you're giving yourself a special challenge and I want to support you through that. I will be very demanding in this essay, and I will expect each of your topic sentences to very specifically outline a persuasive strategy that the writer has used, as that you've unpacked as you did your rhetorical analysis. And again, simply to say the writer uses ethos or pathos is not good enough. It's got to be specific, pointing to exactly what they did and how that created an emotional response or an appeal to credibility or a logical framework for discussion. Okay, thank you very much. I hope you watched this whole video. I hope you took notes, and I look forward to reading essay number 2. Thank you.